Hey guys, tonight we're heading into the cold. The kind of cold that settles behind your eyes, sneaks into your boots, and turns your thoughts into icicles before you can even complain about them. You're in medieval Iceland, trudging through a wind-swept pasture with nothing but sheep for company and a wool hood that smells like yesterday's fire. The sky hangs low and the snowflakes, they don't fall. They descend with theatrical flair, each one its own tiny diva with a name, a backstory, and, probably, an attitude. You squint into the horizon, which has already disappeared, and you swear you can tell these flakes apart. Some land like gentle kisses, others hit your cheek like the ghost of a slap. And here's the wild part. Medieval Icelandic shepherds didn't just deal with this, they described it in terrifyingly specific ways. Because in a world where snow is your ceiling, your floor, your furniture, and your funeral, it really helps to be on a first-name basis. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing who's falling asleep with sheep in their ears across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking the sheep back home. The wind cuts sideways. The snow has shifted from casual swirl to vindictive chaos. It's not just snowing, it's accusing. And you know what kind this is. It's the kind that stings your eyes and makes the sheep look like they're fading into some mythological fog. You whisper its name without thinking, like a spell. Hraid. The sheep barely notice. They've been through worse. But you notice. And that's what matters. You weren't raised with these names, you earned them. Slowly, over years of windburn and misplaced boots, of chasing lambs through snowdrifts that shifted shape like breathing monsters. And you've come to understand something very strange. Snow has moods. Take L, for instance. That's the word for a sudden snow squall. A burst of white tantrum that comes out of nowhere and disappears just as rudely. You don't forget your first ill. That one nearly costs you your left boot and your favorite sheep, the one with the attitude and the crooked horns. But then there's Logan, the soft, moody quiet that follows the drama, a snow that makes no fuss. It just falls like ash from a sleeping volcano. You feel more at home in Logan than you do in any house built with nails. Historians still argue whether this snow vocabulary came from poetry or practicality, but you know it was survival. You know, because tonight, just before the sun collapsed behind the ice-spiked hills, you saw the sky change, not in color, in texture. You smelled it, even like wet wool and distant panic. And when the first flake fell, you knew her. You'd met her before. She was called Fugue, a snowflake that drifts sideways with no intention of landing, just floating, taunting, flirting with your eyebrows. By the time you get home, your face is stiff with frost, but you feel oddly at peace. You unlatch the turf door with hands that barely remember warmth. The sheep pile in like fluffy, exasperated clouds. You close the door, breathe deep, and shake off your cloak. Snow dust spirals down from your shoulders and melts against the hearth's low glow. You watch it, and as it dies into steam, you mutter the name. Kefald, the heavy, choking snow that almost made you lose your way back. You smile as you say it, not because it's pretty, because it warned you. Outside, the flakes keep falling, each one different, each one known. In this valley, it's not enough to say it's snowing. You have to know which kind. And tomorrow, you'll walk out again into another snow that doesn't quite fall the same, just like the sheep. Every flake has a name, and you're the one foolish enough to remember. The next morning, before your fingers find the laces of your boots, you already know what kind of day it's going to be. The light leaking through the turf cracks isn't harsh, it's powdered, muted. The kind of light that lands gently on your thoughts and tells you not to hurry. But you know better. That's fawn. Old snow that settled overnight. Soft, thick, and suspiciously quiet. Like a blanket hiding something beneath it. You sit up and stretch, brushing straw from your sleeves, and hear the sheep outside making that low, judgmental sound they always make when it snows more than they asked for. You grunt back at them. It's too early to negotiate. Outside, you push open the door and step into the whiteness. You don't even bother looking up. The flakes are falling straight down. No drama, no sudden gusts. This is Mjöll the classic, gentle snow, the kind tourists would write poems about. If tourists existed, you know at least 20 types of Mjöll, depending on whether the flakes are sharp-edged, clumpy, or tiny like flour dust. You've actually lost count. Most people would call it obsessive. But you've seen how Mjöll settles in the folds of a lamb's wool like stardust, and you've seen what happens when someone assumes all white is harmless. You trudge down the path toward the lower pasture, crunching through layers of snow you named 3 winters ago and promptly forgot. There's a rhythm to it now. Left foot snjor, right foot driva. That one means drifting snow, a term the older shepherds love to use, usually followed by some dramatic tale of a sheep rescue and a lost mitten. As you walk, your breath fogs in front of you, forming tiny clouds that vanish before they're noticed. The air smells like ash and salt. Someone nearby is already boiling sea ice for water, a normal practice. A terrible tea. You remember when you were younger, and snow was just snow. Then one night, the elder shepherds gathered around the fire and started listing names. Not from a scroll, not in alphabetical order, just from memory. They'd speak softly. Skafreninger, blinding. Yarn, words heavy with experience. Words that didn't translate into any language but cold. Some of them weren't even real Icelandic. Not anymore. Just fragments of older tongues stitched into winter. And they'd laugh not because it was funny, but because it was necessary. You needed to laugh when your boots were still frozen from 3 days ago. The sheep eye you warily as you arrive. You tap your staff against the gate and call to them, not by name, but by insult. It works better. The lead ewe snorts and begins to move, the others following like disheveled royalty. You guide them through the pasture, boots crunching on what's now yarn the firm, older snow that forms a crust, not sharp enough to cut, but firm enough to trip you when you're pretending not to be tired. Historians still argue whether yarn was also used to describe aging people. He's become yarn. One might mutter, not cruelly, just practically, a man more crust than core. And honestly, that tracks. By midday, you find a spot where the snow's thin and the wind behaves. You rest against a birch that somehow still stands, bark peeling like sunburn. You look up, and for the briefest moment, the flakes catch the light just right. One falls on your glove and holds still long enough for you to really see it. A hexagon, perfectly laced, like some divine spider went minimalist. You whisper to it, fleta, a name one shepherd used for braided snow, though nobody agreed on that. And then it melts. That's the thing about all this naming. It doesn't stop the snow. It doesn't protect you from frostbite or make the sheep any less annoying. But it slows down the forgetting. You get back on your feet, herd in tow, and start back toward the croft. The wind picks up again, but this time it carries that surprise snow. You thought you escaped. It laughs as it lands in your beard. You whisper its name, annoyed but impressed. It heard your plans and decided it had better ones. Back at the croft, the sky dims early. Night falls like spilled ink across the valley. The hearth crackles. You sit near it, feet bare, snow melting into the mat beneath you. You're not warm, but you're less cold. That counts for something. You dip your quill into soot and start writing today's snow names on a scrap of birch bark. Because tomorrow, they'll be different. And if you don't name them, who will? Sleep isn't exactly restful when your mattress is dried moss, and your dreams are full of sheep wandering off cliffs. Still, dawn eventually drags you upright, and you shuffle toward the hearth with your blanket wrapped around your shoulders like a dramatic philosopher. Outside, the air has shifted again. You press your ear to the turf wall. No wind, no pelting sound, just silence. That's the worst kind. You step out and immediately regret your optimism. The snow falling now isn't soft or playful. It's needling tiny grains that bite your skin and refuse to melt. You mutter the name under your breath. Nyota. It's not an official word, not one that's recorded in any manuscripts. But among the shepherds, it's known. Snow like this doesn't fall. It attacks. You try to walk it off. But it's the kind of snow that makes you rethink every life choice. You glance upward and sigh. These flakes aren't round. They're shards. Flat, glassy, slicing sideways in a pattern only the mountains understand. The sheep don't want to move. You don't blame them. If this is Sonyopela, the snow lash, You're in for a long day, so you compromise. You let them linger, and you sit on a rock that's been your reluctant friend for years. It's got a dent shaped like your mood. As you sit, you think about how this snow differs from yesterday's yarn. That one was predictable. You could feel it crunch, but this one stings. It sneaks past your hood and into your neck like it's got something to prove. Historians still argue whether Snjapala was a natural phenomenon or a superstition created by shepherds desperate to feel in control of something. But you know better. You've seen it slash sideways into your tea. It's real, and frankly, a bit of a jerk. You adjust your mittens and whisper another name, Drjol. It means snow that pretends to be light but crushes roofs. A deceiver. Pretty from a distance. Lethal when accumulated. You once had to dig out a neighbor's sheep barn from a Drjol storm. The sheep were fine. The barn? Not so much. And then there's Hrolfon snow that makes you shiver just by thinking about it. The kind that doesn't touch you directly, but still finds a way to settle in your bones like regret. Today feels like a Hrolfon day. You glance back at the path and see the tracks you made this morning already gone. Erased. The snow has covered them like it's embarrassed for you. There's a flake that lands on your glove. It's oddly round, thick around the edges, almost like a drop of frozen milk. You grin. This one's mole, short for Mulufancorn, the fat ones. They fall slow, like they're considering their options. You shake your glove and watch it tumble down, joining its siblings in a slow-motion crash. There's something comforting about how specific these names get. One word for clumping snow that sticks to sheep's backs, another for the kind that forms devilish little peaks on fence posts, and another slokvafon for snow that somehow extinguishes fire when it shouldn't. That one you learned the hard way after a kitchen chimney collapsed mid-stew. Your friend Bjorn used to say, if you can name it, you can forgive it. He was probably talking about ex-girlfriends, but it applies here, too. The snow that ruins your boots, forgiven. The snow that breaks your roof, given a name. And the snow that once saved a child by sealing a cave entrance in a storm, immortalized as Barnasen, your child's snow. You sip broth by the fire that evening, staring into the steam like it owes you an answer. Outside, the flakes have shifted again. These are small, sharp, and deliberate, like they're on patrol. You watch a few drift past the window and whisper, Dear Snjor, not because it relates to animals, but because it's rare. Snow that feels expensive, like it only visits when the world forgets to lock the door. There are no tourists here, no books on the shelf with snow diagrams or poetic odes, just your voice, the cold, and a dozen names that probably no one else remembers anymore. And that's fine. The storm quiets just before you fall asleep. You feel a flake land on your brow through the open window gap. It lingers, cold and curious. You give it a name. You don't write this one down. Some snowflakes are too personal. You wake up to the sound of snow laughing at your roof, not actual laughter. Of course, just the slow, rhythmic drip, drip of thawing icicles plotting their next descent. That's Grostafir the Grey Drips, not a snow type. Exactly. But a state of betrayal. It means the snow has begun to lie to you. You step outside and instantly regret it. The snow today is not falling. It's hovering, suspended in midair like it's pretending to be fog. You hold out a hand. The flakes settle lightly, almost apologetically. But this isn't kindness. This is the sort of snow that enters your home without knockings. You look down and sees it clinging to your cloak like lint from an angry god. This is Gloomsnjor ghost snow. It follows you. It haunts you. It finds ways to sneak into your stew, your socks, and the back of your neck during your least dignified moments. You mutter its name aloud and feel just a little better. The sheep are already pacing. They know this kind of snow may look innocent, but it's a prelude to something worse. You gather your staff, whistle low, and begin the walk to the north ridge. And that's when it begins. A flake lands with force. Another strikes your lip like a scolding grandmother. These are not mjolli. These are snarp. Fawn snapflakes, crystalline and sharp-edged. They fall with the density of glass. You shield your face. It's like walking through a bowl of angry sugar. Historians still argue whether Snarfon was a poetic exaggeration or a legitimate meteorological category. You don't argue. You've tasted it. You've plucked it out of your eye. As you crest the ridge, the wind picks up, carrying with it Hrimslug, the fine horizontal snow that paints the sides of buildings in eerie white veils. You squint. The sheep grunt. One of them slips slightly, regains balance, and gives you a look that translates roughly to, "You did this. You didn't." But you still apologize. The wind swirls around the peak, and for a moment, the sky turns into a dome of white noise. You can't tell where the land ends and the air begins. Just as panic begins to rise, you remember a name. Skylasnor Cloud Snow. Snow that doesn't fall. It becomes, you speak it aloud. And somehow, the fear dims. You shuffle toward the shepherd's hut you built last year. A half-buried thing, with just enough dignity to not collapse under judgment. You wedge the sheep inside and slam the door behind them as Flugjorn begins. Flying crust. It whips past like broken pottery. Carried by wind that hasn't learned manners, you press your back to the wall and whisper your inventory. Mjöl, Gloomsnor, Snarpfon, Hrimslug, Flugjorn. Each name feels like an anchor in the storm. A quiet promise that even if the world becomes unreadable, you will still know it. By dusk, the storm calms. You step outside again and notice something peculiar. Tiny balls of snow, round and soft, bouncing gently across the hard-packed ground. You laugh despite yourself. These are kulufon, the playful pellets, useless, annoying, and utterly delightful. You bend down, scoop one up, and toss it toward the nearest sheep. It bounces off her back. She does not flinch. You envy that. Later that night, back in the croft, you scribble a new word in the margin of your bark journal. Verisnjor Merchant Snow. Snow that comes and goes like a traveling salesman, never staying long, always leaving you with a mess. Is it a real word? Probably not. Will you use it again? Definitely. You sip broth. You trace the rim of your wooden bowl with a fingertip. Outside, the snow has shifted yet again. Now it drifts lazily in spirals, as if dancing for no one. You don't know the name for this one yet, but give it time. By morning, you will, before your boots even find the cold floorboards. You feel it in your knees. Today's snow is up to something. You sit by the hearth, rubbing warmth into your hands, while the wind outside presses against the turf walls like a neighbor with bad news. The air smells like stone and ash. You reach for your coat. You already know you'll be muttering names before breakfast. Outside, everything's gone rigid. The snow beneath your feet isn't soft or playful. It crackles loud, sharp, like you're walking on bones. This is Brakfon break snow, the kind that snaps underfoot and announces your arrival to the entire valley whether you like it or not. You grimace as you step forward. The sheep bleat their disapproval. One hoof slip, and it's downhill drama all over again. You push forward, your staff stabbing into the crust. This kind of snow has no forgiveness, but it has structure, and oddly, a kind of dignity. You whisper the name with grudging respect, Brakfon. A few paces later, the texture changes, still crunchy, but now it gives slightly beneath your weight. Not enough to be kind, just enough to be deceptive. This is scarry snow that forms a crusty top with softer layers hidden beneath, like a dangerous pie. You pause. This is the kind of snow that's broken ankles, swallowed carts, and embarrassed more than a few proud hunters. Historians still argue whether scarry was a seasonal phenomenon or a fluke of bad luck. You know the truth. It's both. Scarry waits. The sheep hesitate. You can't blame them. You test the patch ahead, then stomp through with dramatic flair, hoping confidence will compensate for physics. It doesn't. You fall knee-deep with a muffled curse and a squeaky grunt. A snow clump lands directly in your hood. You do not scream. You do, however, invent a new word. Avelsnjor. The surprise snow. Snow that waits until you're cocky before introducing itself personally. You pull yourself out of the drift and scan the horizon. The weather's stable for now, the kind of stable that's just the eye of the storm. Taking a breath, you guide the flock toward the lowland trail. As you walk, your foot lands on a patch of what feels like pressed sugar. You know this one. Everyone fears this one. Raudskari. The red scarry. Not because it's red. There's no color, but because it leads to blood. Not always, but enough times to earn the name. It's like the land decided to place a trap and then cover it with a polite dusting of white. You stop the flock and redirect them carefully, slowly. One misstep, and that crust will cave. The sheep tumbling into hidden crevices you'll never reach in time. You mutter a small thanks to whoever named Raudskari. You owe them. Later, resting beneath a leaning rock ledge, You stare up at the sky. A single flake lands on your cheek. It doesn't sting. It doesn't melt. It simply rests there. You reach for it, delicately, as if not to wake it. It's flat, wide, glossy. You know the name already. Logonsnjor, calm snow. It only falls when the world holds its breath. Some say Logonsnjor is a good omen. Others say it marks the quiet before something bad. You prefer to think of it as a gift. A reminder that even in a land where ice writes death letters on your roof, there's still beauty that refuses to announce itself. You pack your rucksack and begin the walk home. Boots sinking now with softer sound. The Brackfawn has melted into Mirfawn swamp snow, the kind that seeps underfoot and soaks your socks from angles previously unknown to geometry. You say nothing. You simply nod, accepting the betrayal. This, too, is part of the cycle. When you return home, your feet squish in your boots. You peel them off and set them near the hearth, where they'll dry into crusty artifacts by morning. You pull out your bark journal and scratch down a phrase. Sveffen fawn sleep snow, not for a type that falls outside, but for the kind that gathers in your mind as you drift off, soft, silent, not entirely real. You'll never publish this vocabulary, you know that. But still you write it, because if language can forgive the cold, maybe it can forgive you, too. Outside, Logonsnjor continues to fall. Not quickly, not slowly, just perfectly by morning. Your boots are stiff as old grudges. You slip them on anyway, muttering curses in a register only sheep understand, and step outside into what can only be described as a wet betrayal. The snow has changed again. It's not falling. Exactly. It's melting as it lands, soaking your sleeves before you even register the impact. This is Clockfawn snow that arrives pre-doomed. It never settles, never builds. It just lingers, coating everything in a thin sheen of slush that looks innocent, but turns every surface into an ice rink of humiliation. The sheep hate it. You hate it. Even the wind seems to hate it, slinking off somewhere else like a dog ashamed of its own mess. You make your way toward the grazing ledge, where you keep an eye out for fox prints and hoof marks. But today, all you see is a glimmering, sodden crust. Not ice, not snow, something in between. A memory of winter but damp. You sigh. Welcome to Glurfon glass snow. It's rare, beautiful from a distance, but up close, it's the reason your neighbor broke his ankle 3 years ago trying to chase down a goat that owed him money. Historians still debate whether Glurfon was ever officially recorded or just an invention of frustrated farmers. But like most things up here, if enough people limped home cursing the same phenomenon, it earned its place. You shuffle forward, careful not to tempt fate. And suddenly you're hit with Klessusnjor. The word means exactly what it sounds like. Clump snow, sticky, half-frozen slop that forms dense blobs and glues itself to everything it touches: your knees, your staff, the underside of your sheep. You kick at a rock to knock the mess off your boots and mutter, might as well walk in porridge. The sheep do not laugh. By midday, it gets worse. The flakes thicken, swell, and begin to fall with a splat. You barely recognize them. Round, dense, and vaguely gelatinous. These are Kvensnjor, or as some old-timers jokingly call it, snow with opinions. It falls with purpose. It sticks with confidence. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It's the kind of snow that changes your route, changes your plans, changes your relationship with your knees. You pass 2 other shepherds on the ridge who look equally miserable. One raises a gloved hand and yells, Kvensnjor. Ja, you nod, and he disappears into the fog again, trailing exasperated goats behind him like soggy royalty. Back at the croft, you peel off your outer layer and watch puddles form in the cracks between floorboards. The fire sputters as a wet sleeve gets too close. You're soaked through, but there's an odd satisfaction in naming each variety as you wring them out. You scribble a few lines into your journal. Clockfawn, Glerfoy, Klessusnjor, Kvensnjor, like a cursed family tree. And then you pause, quill hovering above the bark, because you remember one more The rarest of all, the one the elders whispered about like it was a fairy tale or a warning. Snurti fancona, the flirt snow, they say it falls in delicate spirals, that it catches on eyelashes and lingers on lips, that it makes you forget you're cold until you're shivering. It's the snow that fools lovers into walking too far from the fire. You've seen it once, years ago, and maybe it wasn't even real. Maybe it was just wind and hormones and the smell of spruce in the air. But you remember the flakes? How they moved like they had secrets. How she laughed, brushing them from her hair. Historians, of course, claim the term's not linguistically sound, that fancona isn't a documented suffix, that shepherds don't have time for romance in the middle of a storm. But you know better, you smile, fold the page, and set it near the fire to dry. Because even in this land of cold grudges and frozen boots, sometimes snow has charm, and sometimes you let it. Today begins with a sound you never like to hear, ice cracking beneath confidence. You're barely 10 steps out the door when one of your boots punches through a crust of snow pretending to be solid. That's scary. Again, your old frenemy. It tempts you with a crunchy surface and then eats your shin. But today, it's gotten creative. This isn't just scary. This is Sikurskar, or what some shepherds jokingly call sugar ice snow, so crisp and thin it sounds like it'll hold, but collapses under anything heavier than a squirrel with secrets. You mutter a curse and pull your foot free, wiggling it like a man trying to shake off shame. The sheep behind you hesitate. They know better. They've got 4 legs and more experience being embarrassed in snow. You wave them on, pretending you meant to do that. You did not. As you guide the flock toward the ravine, you feel the texture shift again. There's a kind of snow here that crunches but doesn't give like stale bread underfoot. This is gnistrosnjor, the squeaky kind, dry, stubborn, and just noisy enough to ruin any attempt at a stealthy stroll. Historians still argue whether Gnistrosnjor was a regional dialect word or just a shepherd's passive-aggressive way of complaining about snow that outs your every move. Either way, it's real and annoying. Midway up the ridge, the sheep stall again. This time, it's not the footing, it's the wind. And with it comes blesa, a peculiar kind of snow that doesn't fall so much as arrive. It's airborne, thin, like ash from a far-off fire. It touches your skin and vanishes, leaving behind a vague sense of unease, like you forgot to latch the barn door or pay a debt to some mountain spirit. You whisper the name as you pull your cloak tighter. A flake lands on your tongue. Bitter. Figures. The trail grows steeper, and your boots dig into what you recognize immediately as Blexnjor ink snow. It stains. Not black. Exactly. But darker than it should be. Sometimes it's the soil, sometimes it's volcanic ash from distant eruptions, and sometimes, no one really knows. You once heard a tale about a shepherd who blamed Blexnjor for the disappearance of his entire herd, said they fell through the paper of the land. You assume he'd also fallen through a few mugs of something fermented. Still hard to forget. You finally reach the top, breath visible in thick puffs, and spot the narrow footbridge ahead. It crosses a frozen stream you've never trusted, even in high summer. You test the snow with your staff and hear the dreaded hollow crunch of Holusnjor whole snow, the kind that covers pits, ditches, crevices, regrets. It pretends to be smooth terrain until you're knee-deep in an existential moment. You steer wide, murmuring cautionary names as you go. Each step, a quiet prayer in a cold tongue. By the time you return home, the sun has lowered into that strange Icelandic position where it never commits to setting. The snow is glowing now. Not white, not gold, something in between. That's when you see it. Finsnjor, the snow that seems to shimmer. Some say it only appears when you're not looking for it. Others say it's caused by ice crystals catching angled light. You say it's a reminder that even after a day of betrayal, fall-throughs, and complaints, snow can still surprise you, still make you stop and just look. You kneel, you brush a patch clean with your hand, and for a moment, it's not cold. It's just quiet. You return to the croft with your cheeks red, your notes damp, and your boots full of snow that somehow found a way in again. You sit by the fire and add Sikurskar, Gnistrosnjor, Blesa, Blexnjor, Holusnjor, and Finn's Jor to your growing catalog. You don't alphabetize. You don't even spell them the same way twice. You write them as you remember them in the order they hit you, because that's how snow works. And tomorrow will be different again. You wake before the light arrives, not from a sound, but from a sense like something outside remembered your name. You pull on your cloak and open the door. Just a crack, expecting wind or whiteness, or maybe a sheep with boundary issues. But instead, nothing. No breeze, no drift. The snow is just standing there. You step out cautiously, your boots meeting a surface that shouldn't exist, untouched, unnaturally even, and somehow aware. Every flake around you seems still, not frozen. Pause. Like a breath being held. You whisper it before you even think. Draugason Jor ghost snow, not the harmless powder from last week. This kind has weight, a spiritual fog, the sort of snow you swear is watching you. Historians dismiss the term as superstition. One of the many rural snow ghosts whispered about to scare children or explain strange disappearances. But you're not scared. Not exactly. You just know better than to speak too loud. You guide the sheep toward the southern slope. Slowly, with respect. You don't use your staff. Not on ghost snow. The sound might stir something. About halfway down the trail, the air shifts again. A single flake falls in the wrong direction upward. You blink. It happens again. This is fan counter snow. You've only seen it twice in your life. Snow that refuses gravity. Snow that drifts and spirals against the wind like it's arguing with physics. You stand still as the sheep huddle behind you. The world feels inverted. Even the trees look confused. You hold out a hand and let one of the rebellious flakes land in your palm. It melts too quickly, as if ashamed. Then, suddenly, it's gone. Just like that. The stillness breaks. You take a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding. The rest of the journey is calmer. The snow underfoot is thick and heavy now. 3 Snor, pressure snow, the kind that compacts as you walk, leaving behind a deep, purposeful trail. It feels honest. Somehow, the opposite of Draugasnor. You reach the river and stop. It's frozen, of course, but thin. The kind of ice that speaks when you step on it. Beneath your boots, you spot Silver's azure silver snow. Not real silver, obviously, but the kind of pale shimmer that makes a surface look like it belongs in a myth or a bard's drunkest ballad. You take one step, then another. The sheep stay behind. Smart. The ice holds, barely, and then a sound. Not cracking, singing, just under the surface a faint tone, like someone plucking a frozen harp string in another world. You freeze, heart pounding. Is it the wind? Is it your mind? Or is it Snerts Njor the touch snow? The kind of snow that reacts, not loudly, not violently, just gently enough to let you know it knows you're there. You cross quickly and don't look back. Later, by the croft's fire, you sit with your gloves still on and write down the new names, not just to remember them, but to honor the way they made you feel. You add a line, if snow listens, then let this be my whisper. You don't read it out loud. Tonight, the snow outside falls in wide arcs, gently brushing the windows like a lullaby with no melody. You leave the shutters open just a little. Let it listen. The sun never truly rises this time of year. It just lightens the dark a little, like a candle behind a curtain. You wake to a pale glow, one that says, don't bother asking what time it is. You sit up and stretch, your joints popping like frost on a tin roof. The fire's gone out. The air inside the croft is colder than your attitude before breakfast. You wrap your cloak tight and push the door open. What greets you is not snow, not at first. It's silence. Then, as your eyes adjust, you see it. The landscape isn't just white, it's layered. Bands of snow stacked like a sedimentary memory. You take a step forward, and the air sparkles, not just glimmers, twinkles, like crushed stars have been ground into the snow. This is a Stjörnufan star snow. Shepherds say it only falls on the rarest nights, usually when the sky is clear, but the ground wants attention. It doesn't fall fast. It settles. Like glitter in a snow globe someone forgot to shake. You breathe out slowly. The air doesn't fight you. It lets you exist. The sheep are already awake, clustering near the fence, as if they, too, know this kind of snow deserves a little reverence. You guide them out, boots pressing into a top layer so delicate it breaks with a chime. No, not actual sound, but feeling, like walking on frozen wind chimes. Then comes a moment you dread. A visitor. You spot him before he sees you. A monk from the coastal monastery, wandering too far inland again. His robe is soaked halfway up. His nose is redder than his vows allow. He waves. You wave back, reluctantly. He reaches you, panting like a lost pilgrim who's never seen uphill terrain. What a storm last night, he says. You nod. What would you call this snow? He asks, pointing around. You're like a tourist in a spiritual crisis. You hesitate, then say, Stjörnufon. He blinks. So, glitter snow. You sigh. It's not glitter. It's starlight in powdered form. He nods blankly and pulls out a notebook. Right. We just call this snow. You stare at him for a moment too long. Back in the croft, you write, some snow has no translation. Some minds have no snow. That feels unkind. So you scratch it out and replace it with, keep the naming. Even if no one else hears it. Later, the snow begins to thicken again. Not in flake count, but in density. These flakes don't drift. They fall. With weight. With the confidence of an accusation. This is Thungfon heavy snow. Each flake lands like a footstep. You stand by the fence and feel it coat your shoulders. Your hair, your journal. There's something comforting about it. Something honest. Historians argue whether Thungfon was just a poetic way of saying blizzard, or if it described a snow that fell with more intention. You know the answer. It's the kind that makes even birds land early. By nightfall, the fire's back on, your cloak is steaming by the hearth, and the monk is asleep in the corner, snoring like a broken bellows. You don't mind much. You sip broth and open your journal, flipping past the pages with names, drawings, and small stains of melted memory. You add one more. Kvida snore, anxious snow. Snow that reminds you of things you haven't done yet. You blow on the ink until it sets. Outside, the anxious snow keeps falling. Not fast, not hard, but like it knows time is running short. Morning arrives like a knock on the back of your mind. You rise stiffly, swaddled in layers that smell like wood smoke and damp wool, and glance over at the monk, still drooling peacefully onto your only spare fur. You let him be. He looks too comfortable to ruin. The croft creaks. You creak louder. And when you step outside, the world has changed again. At first glance, it's just more white. But then your foot sinks in and doesn't stop. You're hip deep before you can even curse. This is Fuljodfon sinking snow. No crunch, no warning, just collapse. It looks soft and welcoming, like fresh cream poured over a storybook hill. But underneath, treachery. You claw your way out with the grace of an irritated seal and glance back. The sheep refuse to follow. They know better. One of them stares at you with a look that says, we've talked about this. You redirect toward higher ground, muttering. The wind has slowed, but the sky has taken on that eerie, bruised hue, the color of old parchment and regret. You spot a single flake drifting downward, enormous and lazy. It lands on your glove. You blink. It's iridescent, wide, and shivering at the edges like it's unsure of itself. This is Leafsnjor life snow, not because it gives life, but because it stalls death. According to Valley lore, there's always a patch of it before someone's rescued, or forgiven, or finally tells the truth. You stare at it a moment longer than you should, then brush it away before it melts into mystery. The wind shifts again, and suddenly, your eyes sting. This is Bleakfon blinding snow, not from volume, but from glare. It reflects every inch of pale sky until you can't tell cloud from cliff. The monk used to call it heaven's trick mirror. You call it a problem. Historians still debate whether the Icelandic obsession with snow names was a product of isolation, poetry, or desperation. You know the truth. It was survival. Because Bleakfon can trick you into stepping off a ridge you didn't know was there. You crouch low, guiding the sheep along by voice alone. You don't dare lift your eyes. Just keep them focused on the soft, gray shapes moving ahead of you like stubborn clouds in boots. By the time you reach the slope's end, the light has faded again, though it never really arrived. And then it happens. One snowflake lands on your glove that you recognize, not just the type, the actual flake. You know this one. You've seen it before, or something exactly like it. Your breath catches. This is for Jafnarfon forgiving snow, the kind that comes once in a lifetime. That arrives when you're ready to make peace with something old and sour. You think of Bjorn. Your friend, your rival, the one you haven't spoken to in 5 winters, not since the storm that took his barn, and your pride in equal measure. You thought of writing, you thought of sending lamb's wool as an apology, but the words never came. And yet, here it is. This flake, his flake, maybe. You stand in silence as the sheep graze. The monk has wandered somewhere behind you, humming off key and ruining the atmosphere. Still, you smile, you whisper the name, Forgjafnarfon, and you promise yourself you'll send something, anything, a note, a carving, even just a word on birch bark. You'll let the snow carry the rest. That night, you sit by the fire and open your journal. You add 3 new names. Fljodfon, snow that swallows. Blickfon, snow that blinds. Forgjafnarfon, snow that softens what memory can't. The monk reads over your shoulder and says, "Do you really believe snow can forgive?" You don't answer. You just hand him your spare quill and point to a blank page. He doesn't write anything, but he stays quiet for once. Outside, Forgjafnarfon keeps falling. The next morning, the croft is unnervingly warm. Not warm like pleasant spring breeze warm. Warm like something's wrong. You open the door cautiously, expecting rain or thaw. Instead, you're greeted by the heavy scent of snow about to change its mind. The wind smells wet, but the ground is still white. Barely. The snow underfoot is dense, not just heavy resigned. It doesn't puff or squeak. It slumps, and as your boot presses into it, you feel it yield in a way that says, "I didn't want to be here anyway." This is the Gjandafon, the silent snow, not because it doesn't fall with sound, but because it keeps secrets. Snow that falls during arguments. Snow that listens and holds its tongue. You glance back at the monk, who's sweeping the hearth like he's been guilt-tripped by a ghost. You leave him to it. The sheep are already restless, likely sensing what you do. This snow won't last. It's the kind that pretends to be loyal, then disappears mid-shift. The kind that melts just fast enough to make your sleeves damp and your boots soggy, but not fast enough to be useful. You whistle. They move. On the path to the ridge, you pass the old boundary stone half buried now. Around it, the snow takes on a different quality. Sparkling. Not quite. More twitchy, like it's vibrating beneath the surface. You kneel and touch it. It's warm. Just barely. But enough to notice. You whisper the name under your breath. Kvajkjasnjor, kindling snow. Snow that somehow stores heat, that dares to defy its purpose. You've only seen it twice. Once before a landslide. Once before a wedding that should have been cancelled. Historians claim Kvajkjasnjor was metaphorical emotional heat, not physical. But your fingertips disagree. You press on, navigating around slush patches and half-frozen puddles. That's when you hear it. The slurp, the unmistakable sound of sofinur sofa snow. Snow that squelches, sinks, and cushions with all the grace of wet bread under a bare foot. It's disgusting. It's hilarious. It's the reason half the valley has mismatched socks this time of year. You wade through it, muttering a list of grievances and snow-related insults. The sheep follow with equal reluctance, their legs vanishing every third step into a squishy mess that should not legally be called terrain. And then the wind changes just slightly and brings with it the scent of smoke, not wood smoke, peat, a deeper, older burn. You know that smell, and you know what follows it. Sure enough, before long, the snowflakes turn dark, not black, just sooty. They land on your glove and leave tiny smudges, as if they've come from a chimney too exhausted to try harder. This is Reykjavik smoke snow, born from distant volcanoes or, more often, neighboring chimney fires someone forgot to smother. You whisper the word, not because it's necessary, just because it feels right. A gust of wind kicks up the soot snow and whirls it around your boots in a slow, ominous circle. You get the message. Back at the croft, the monk is boiling something that smells like regret and onion. You nod at him and set down your journal. 3 new entries today. The Gjandifon, the quiet snow that watches. Kvajkjasnjor, the snow that carries a spark. Reykjavik, the snow that smells like endings. You stare at the page a moment too long. Then, almost without thinking, you scrawl a 4th, Gratfon, crying snow, snow that arrives too late to help, but shows up anyway. You don't know if you'll ever use it, but you feel better for writing it down. That night, outside the croft, the snow falls in uneven clumps like someone upstairs is just done. You sit by the window, a blanket around your shoulders, and listen. And if that snow is whispering, you let it. You don't go outside the next morning, not right away. You sit in silence by the hearth, cupping a bowl of something warm enough to feel like a favor. The monk is gone. He left at first light, leaving only a thank you scratched into the frost on your door. He spelled your name wrong, but the sentiment was there. You finally rise and step out onto the threshold, and the world greets you with a hum. Not literal, not sound, but something in the snow vibrates with presence. You feel it under your soles, a kind of tension. This is Kirk used in your church snow, not because it falls on holy days, but because it makes everyone walk slower, softer, quieter. Snow that demands reverence. Even if you haven't believed in anything for years, you tighten your cloak and take a few slow steps. Each boot sinks and sighs, leaving behind prints that look more like prayers than tracks. By the time you reach the pasture, the snow has shifted again. It's sharp, not in texture, but in behavior. The flakes sting, but only if you look at them. They avoid your touch, but somehow still find your wrists. You recognize it immediately. Nagelfannen nail snow, not because it harms, but because it presses. It pokes just enough to make you angry at things you haven't thought about in months. The wrong words spoken by a friend. The reply you never gave. The debt no one called in, but that still weighs. Historians dismiss Nagelfan as metaphor. You know better. You mutter its name with clenched teeth, then take a detour through the upper slope, trying to avoid the sharpest of its reach. The wind eases, and for a few precious moments, you're met with stillness, not calm. Exactly. Just pause. The snow now falls in perfect symmetry. Every flake seems the same size, same shape, same direction. This is Jeffersonjord even snow. Shepherds trust it. Builders like it. It means a roof won't collapse tonight. It means your footing won't lie. It's the kind of snow that makes you feel, just briefly, like the world might be fairer than you remember. You let your shoulders drop and lean against a fence post. You watch it fall, soft as breath, until one flake lands too gently to ignore. It's different. Wide, slow spinning, and nearly translucent. You hold out your glove. It lands like a memory. This is up Pafsfon beginning snow. The first snow of something. You don't know what. Maybe a season. Maybe a story. Maybe a version of yourself you forgot was still there. You whisper the name and feel your throat tighten. You want to speak to someone. To say, did you see it? But there's no one nearby. The sheep are busy, munching on roots beneath the crust. The monk is gone. The mountain just stares. So you walk back, slower than usual. Not because you're tired, because you're listening. And when you return to the croft, you don't start the fire right away. You sit at your table, wet cloak and all, and write, Kirkusnjor, the snow that hushes. Nagelfan, the snow that pokes old bruises. Jeffersonjord, the snow that balances everything. Uphavsfon, the first snow of something unnamed. You add a small line beneath them. Even the quiet has chapters. Outside, Jeffersonjord continues its steady fall. Like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. You close your eyes and wait for the next paragraph to begin. You hear the snow before you see it. It's not the usual hush, or even the wind's muttering. It's rhythmic, a pattern, a soft, steady brushing like someone dragging a wool mitten over skin. Over and over, you pull on your boots, already regretting it, and open the door. What greets you is dancing, not flakes, not quite. These are Filgusnjor veil snow, so fine and thread-thin they move more like silk than water. They don't fall, they hover. They drift in overlapping curtains, each layer sweeping through the air with unbothered elegance. You step into it, and your breath catches. It doesn't sting. It tickles, like being nudged by something too soft to defend against. It's snow that reminds you you're alive, just to be annoying. Historians argue whether Filgusnjor was named for its resemblance to wedding veils or burial shrouds. As far as you're concerned, it's both, which, in Iceland, are sometimes interchangeable anyway. You guide the sheep slowly, careful not to speak too loudly. This snow reacts to sound. You're sure of it. You once sneezed during a Filgusnjor morning, and the air seemed to flinch. Halfway to the southern fence line, the veil lifts, the snow sharpens. It's become Hnoofan, now knuckle snow, not because it hits, but because it feels bony, thin, fast, angular flakes that scrape past your cheeks like someone brushing you with cartilage. You pull your hood tighter and lower your head. This snow has opinions. The sheep march through it, unbothered. They're wearing better coats than you are. You step through a low gully where the wind swirls unpredictably. Here, a new kind of snow takes over. Hringsnjor circle snow. The kind that doesn't land. It loops. You stand there for a full minute, just watching flakes chase their own tails in an endless spiral. Like they're stuck in a story with no ending. You whisper the name and try not to get dizzy. When you emerge on the other side, your face is flushed and your thoughts are tangled. You pause by a boulder and sit. The sheep gather close, their warmth a quiet mercy, and then unexpectedly the snow stops. Not slows, stops. You look up, nothing falls, not a single flake. The sky, if it even still exists, is a pale dome of blankness. This is Modorfon Mother Snow, not for comfort, but for authority, the kind that pauses all other weather. It holds the air still. It stops sound. It waits. You've only seen it twice. Both times, someone died. You sit very still. The sheep don't move. Not even the wind dares. It only lasts a few minutes, maybe less, but you feel it. That wait, that pause, like the snow itself, and took a deep breath and made the entire world hold it with her. Then, without warning, it starts again, gently, slowly, like forgiveness falling in fragments. You whisper the name and rise to your feet. Later, back at the croft, you scratch today's names into the bark journal. Filguznjor, veil snow that hovers. Hnoofan, snow with elbows. Hringsnjor, looping, stubborn snow. Modorfon, mother snow, the silence between storms. And for no reason you can explain, you add one more, Hlisnjor, the snow. You don't notice until it's already changed everything. You stare at the page, unsure when you learned that one, but you know it. Outside, the flakes continue to fall, looping around corners, brushing against your window like old thoughts returning without apology. The morning doesn't arrive, it seeps in. A slow grayness leaks through the turf cracks and folds itself around your shoulders like a damp shawl. You lie still for a moment, listening. No howling wind, no crunching drift. Just a soft, wet hush. You already know what this is. You open the door and the smell hits you first. Melting. The snow isn't falling anymore. It's giving up. You step into the slush and feel it squelch beneath your boot like regret. This is Slatusnjor, the snow that surrenders. It doesn't fight the sun. It just lowers its head and dissolves, one sigh at a time. It's easy to hate this kind of snow. It soaks your socks, erases your paths, makes the land shapeless. But part of you respects it. It lets go with dignity. The sheep are already slumping around in it, their legs coated in wet fluff. They grumble more than usual. You sympathize. The valley is unrecognizable, ridges smoothed, trails blurred. The snow loses its names when it melts. But even in this, you listen, because there's still a name here, whispered between the drips falling from every even branch. Tregafonen, reluctant snow. It doesn't want to leave. Not fully. It lingers in the corners of stones and fence posts, holding its shape just long enough to matter. Historians don't often record this phase. It's messy, imperfect, but you know it's just as important. You guide the sheep downhill, pausing where the meltwater forms tiny rivers beneath the crust. Here, the snow curves inward, forming tunnels, pockets, sudden sinkholes where water steals the ground out from under you. This is Lignafon, lying snow, not as in quiet, as in deceptive. Snow that pretends to be solid until your entire left leg disappears into a slushy trap. You haul yourself out and stare back at the hole like it personally insulted you. You whisper its name aloud, Lignafon, and then kick it. Immature. Yes, satisfying. Also yes, the sky is lowering again, not with snow, with mist. You blink into it, watching as the shapes around you begin to lose their edges. This is Mindafon Picture Snow. It's not about the snow itself. It's about the way the air makes everything look like snow, like a landscape drawn in charcoal and erased too late. The real and the imagined blur. You stare at the flock, Their outlines fuzzy, their movement slow. They could be statues or stories. You crouch and let your hand rest against a melting drift. Underneath, something pulses, not movement, not sound, just a presence. This is the kind of snow that doesn't just fall, it records. You don't write its name in your journal yet. You let it stay in your mouth, unsaid. You head back late, with your boots heavy and your hands raw. Inside the croft, you light a small fire and peel off your socks, which now weigh more than some of your sheep. The wind outside has picked up not cold wind, just tired wind. The kind that pushes snow around like old letters nobody wants to read again. You open your journal. You write carefully. Slatu snor, snow that knows when to quit. Tregafun, snow that lingers too long. Lagnafun, snow that lies about what it is. Mindafonen, snow that isn't snow, but memory pretending to be landscape. And then you add a final line, unsure where it came from. Some snow doesn't fall, it waits. You set your quill down. The snow outside is gone now, but something's still falling. The snow returns that night without sound. Not a storm, not a flurry, just a steady reappearance. You step outside with your cloak clutched tight, breath puffing small ghosts into the air. The world is already white again, but not new white. It's familiar, as if the snow remembered where it landed last time and simply returned. You take one step, and the sound it makes tells you everything. Soft grain, dry base, thick air, you know this. This is Heimfahren home snow. The snow that always comes back, that falls in the exact way your bones expect. That smells like cedar smoke and wool oil and your grandmother's bread that never quite rose. Historians don't write about Heimfahren because it's not useful. It doesn't signal change or danger or celebration. It's just comforting, predictable, which, in Iceland, is rare enough to be sacred. You walk toward the ridge, the sheep following with less reluctance now. Even they seem to recognize this kind. Their hooves crunch and sink in harmony. And for once, no one falls. You reach the pasture and pause. Above you, the flakes fall slowly wide, lacy, quiet. There's no wind, no threat, just rhythm. And that's when you notice something strange. Not with your eyes, with your ears. The snow is falling in beats, a steady pattern. You glance up. A branch sways slightly with the weight of new snow, then stills. A flake lands on your glove, then another. 3 seconds later, you've counted this before. Years ago, when you were a boy, this is taktfon rhythm snow, the kind that falls in measure. That soothes animals. That sends old people into storytelling trances. You once watched your aunt speak for 2 straight hours during a taktfon storm. No interruptions, just stories and snow, and one long-lost song about a troll that could knit. You smile, stepping farther out into the field. The snow piles up slowly, perfectly, as if it knows where it belongs. You look behind you. No footprints. They're gone already. Not buried, vanished. You look again. Even the sheep leave no trail. This is Farfinsnjor, vanishing snow. The snow that takes memory with it. A shepherd once told you, if you stand still too long in Farfinsnjor, you forget why you came outside. You test that theory. You stand. You listen. You try to recall what brought you here today. And for just a moment, you can't. But then a flake lands on your lip. Cold, real, and it brings you back. You guide the sheep home in silence, trailing no visible proof you were ever there. Inside, the fire crackles. You pull off your cloak and open the journal. The last page, you write, carefully. Heimfahren, the snow that always returns. Taktfon, snow that falls in rhythm. Varfinsnjor, snow that erases footprints and intentions alike. Then, slowly, you set down your quill. You close the journal and press your hand to the cover, not to protect it, just to feel that it's still warm. Outside, the snow falls softer than ever. Each flake lands without echo, and you, exhausted, full of names, finally rest. And now, the snow falls only in your mind. You feel it. Behind your eyes, soft, patient, nameless now. There's no need to describe it anymore, no need to measure, or compare, or whisper syllables into the wind just to feel like you still exist. Because tonight, you've already named more than weather. You've named silence, memory, the moment before sleep. Let them drift. Let them settle. You're inside now, wrapped in something that doesn't need translation, not wool, not wood, something gentler. The world outside continues, sure, but you've stepped away from it. The fire is dim, just glowing coals now. Their light flickers across the walls in slow, pulsing rhythm tactphon. In ember form, you take one final breath, deep, slow, snow-cooled, and with it, you release everything else. The sharp snow, the rude snow, the snow that lied and poked and danced. You let it all melt, right there inside you. And what's left? Just the kind that stays, the kind that falls inside your chest, spreads through your limbs, and hushes your thoughts into silence. So, close your eyes, let it cover everything. Let it name nothing. Sleep well, sleep warm, sleep snow.